The day had come. Princess Lyra, the youngest daughter of King Varan of the Zenthari, found herself standing on the edge of the dark forest. The air was thick with the scent of strange wild plants. The tall, shadowy trees loomed above her, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear the growl of beasts echoing through the trees. Lyra had been thrown into this place as part of a cruel tradition. Her father's enemies, the leaders of the alien races in the galaxy, had captured her. They saw her as weak because she was the youngest. To them, this was the perfect way to break the Zenthari spirit. They believed that by casting her into the wild to face the beast, they would end her life and crush the hope of her people. But Lyra was not weak. She was a princess, and she was not going to give up without a fight. Her heart beat fast, but her mind stayed focused. She had trained her whole life to face such challenges, though nothing could have prepared her for what she was about to face. With every step, the ground felt more unstable. Sharp rocks and thick roots tried to trip her, but she refused to fall. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows that danced across the ground. She had to keep moving, had to find shelter before the beast found her. If she couldn't outrun it, she would have to fight. She was determined. She knew how to survive, how to use her surroundings to her advantage. Her father had taught her about the ways of the land, the right plants to eat, the best places to hide, but none of it mattered if the beast found her. The stories of the beast were terrifying. It was a creature of massive size, with scales that shimmered like metal and eyes that glowed with hunger. It had razor-sharp claws and teeth that could tear through armor. The beast had killed many before. Lyra's only hope was to outsmart it, to stay hidden long enough for help to arrive. But there was no help coming. She was alone. Her father's enemies had seen to that. She had heard the whispers of the council members before she left. They thought her weak. They thought the beast would end her, but they were wrong. She had a strength inside her that they didn't understand. She would survive. It's a dot. As the darkness of the forest deepened, Lyra stopped for a moment to catch her breath. Of leaves rustling reached her ears, and she quickly ducked behind a thick tree. Her heart pounded in her chest. She was not alone. From the corner of her eye, she saw at the beast. It was huge, its body covered in rough scales that reflected the faint light of the moons above. It moved silently through the forest, its sharp claws digging into the earth with every step. Its eyes glowed a bright, unsettling green. The beast sniffed the air, its head turning as it sought out its prey. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. She had to move. Slowly, she crouched low, trying to stay hidden in the shadows. Her pulse raced as the beast's glowing eyes scanned the area. It was only a matter of time before it found her. She knew this was her only chance to escape, to run. Without thinking, she turned and sprinted as fast as she could. The branches whipped at her face as she ran, but she didn't slow down. The beast was fast, faster than anything she had ever encountered. She could hear it crashing through the forest behind her, its growls echoing in the air. Lyra pushed herself harder, her muscles burning as she ran. She could feel the creature closing in on her, could almost hear its heavy breathing as it gained. On her, she could not let it catch her. She had to find a way to survive. Suddenly, she stumbled. Her foot caught on a root, and she fell hard to the ground. Pain shot through her side, but she didn't have time to think about it. The beast was almost upon her. She could hear it getting closer, the sound of its claws scraping the ground growing louder. With everything she had left, Lyra pushed herself up and ran once more. The trees seemed to blur around her as she dashed through the forest, hoping to outrun the creature. But the beast was relentless. It was faster, stronger. It would not stop until it had her. Just when she thought she couldn't run any longer, she saw something, a shape moving quickly through the trees. It was a figure, a human figure, running toward her. Her heart skipped a beat. Who was this? Could they help her? Before she could understand what was happening, the figure was beside her. No. The human grabbed her arm and pulled her out of the path of the beast just as it leapt toward them. The beast's claws missed her by inches. Lyra had never seen someone move so fast, so decisively. The human didn't hesitate for a second. He pulled her into the safety of the trees, away from the creature that had almost killed her. For the first time since she had been thrown into this wild place, Lyra felt something she hadn't in days: hope. She wasn't alone anymore. And maybe, just maybe, she could survive after all. The human pulled Lyra deeper into the forest, his grip strong and steady. She could barely keep up with him as he led her through the thick underbrush, his pace faster than anything she had ever experienced. Her heart was still racing from the encounter with the beast, and she felt as if she might collapse from exhaustion at any moment. The creature was still out there, hunting them. The human didn't look back, his eyes fixed ahead, scanning the path ahead with a focus that Lyra couldn't quite understand. His clothes were torn and covered in dirt, but he moved with purpose. There was something about him that seemed different from the warriors of her people. While her people had honor and pride, this man had something else, something practical. It was as if he had fought battles like this before. Lyra tried to catch her breath as she kept pace with him. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice shaky. The human didn't answer at first. He just kept moving, his eyes darting around, alert to every sound in the forest. After a moment, he spoke, his voice rough, as if he had been yelling for hours. "Name's Aiden," he said. "I'm not from here, just passing through. But I couldn't leave you out there. That beast, ... It's relentless." Lyra tried to process his words. Aiden, a human, like the ones who had fought against her people in the past. She had heard stories of humans of their strange ways, and their even stranger weapons. But she had never expected to meet one, let alone be saved by one. "Why help me?" she asked. "My people. They are your enemies." Aiden glanced over at her briefly, his face hard like he had seen too much. "I don't care about your people or mine. I saw you in trouble, and I helped. That's all." Lyra felt a strange pang in her chest at his words. For a moment, she didn't know how to respond. She had never met anyone who spoke so simply, without the need for honor or pride. But before she could think any further, a growl echoed through. The trees behind them was the beast, and it was getting closer. Aiden didn't hesitate. He grabbed Lyra's arm again and pulled her into a narrow gap between two massive trees. The space was tight, and she had to bend low to fit, but it was the only place that might offer them a chance to hide. She held her breath, hoping the beast wouldn't find them, but the growls grew louder. Aiden motioned for her to be quiet. He crouched low, listening, his body tense. Lyra could hear the beast moving, its massive form brushing against the trees. It was close, so close that she could feel the vibrations of its steps through the ground. She pressed herself against the rough bark of the tree, trying to stay as still as possible. Her heart was beating so loudly in her chest that she thought, for sure the beast would hear it. A few moments passed in silence, but the growling didn't stop. The creature was circling them, its nose sniffing the air. Lyra could feel the hot breath of the beast on her neck, and she stiffened, hoping it wouldn't detect their hiding place. Aiden's hand was still on her arm, his grip tight as if he could feel her fear. He gave her a quick glance, his eyes calm but alert. His presence was oddly comforting, even though he was a stranger. "We can't stay here," Aiden whispered. "We need to move while it's distracted." Lyra nodded, her mind racing. She had no idea what kind of plan he had, but she trusted him more than she trusted the hunters from her own people. They had thrown her into the wild to die, but this human had saved her. She had to trust him. Aiden carefully pulled her out from behind the trees, moving as silently as possible. The beast had moved a little farther away, still growling in the distance. They ran quickly, weaving through the trees. Staying low to the ground, Lyra could hear the creature once more, but this time its roar was full of frustration. It was still searching for them, but they were gaining ground. They had to get to safety. Eventually the sounds of the beast faded behind them. But Aiden didn't slow down. He kept running, pushing through the dense forest. Lyra followed, feeling the sting of branches against her skin, but she didn't complain. She knew they had to keep moving. They couldn't stop until they were far away from the creature. After what felt like an eternity, Aiden finally stopped, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Lyra was exhausted, but she didn't dare stop. She knew they were still not safe. Aiden turned to her, his expression serious. "Listen," he said, "we're not out of danger yet. We need to find a place to rest. But it has to be safe. That beast won't give up easily." Lyra nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. She looked round, trying to find a place that could offer them some shelter. There was a small cave up ahead, partially hidden by a cluster of bushes. It wasn't much, but it would be enough for the night. "We can hide in there," she said, pointing toward the cave. Aiden nodded and led the way. They made their way toward the cave, their footsteps silent on the ground. When they reached it, Aiden checked inside, making sure it was clear. Satisfied, he motioned for Lyra to enter first. As she stepped inside the cave, she looked back at the human, feeling a mixture of gratitude and confusion. She had no idea what he wanted from her, but for now, she was alive, and that was enough. The cave was small, but deep enough to offer them some shelter. The air was cool and damp, and the ground was covered with a thin layer of moss. Lyra couldn't help but notice the strange stillness that had settled around them. The wild noises of the forest had quieted, and all that could be heard now was the sound of their breathing. She sat down against the wall of the cave, trying to gather her thoughts. But her mind kept returning to the human, Aiden. He was sitting across from her, his back against the cave wall, eyes fixed on the entrance. He seemed completely at ease, as though this was just another day for him. Lyra couldn't understand how he could be so calm. To her, this was a fight for survival, not a routine task. Aiden glanced over at her. "You should try to rest," he said, his voice low. "We need to keep our strength up. The beast will keep hunting us, but we'll need to be ready when it comes back." Lyra nodded, though she wasn't sure she could rest. Her body ached from the constant running, and her mind was still racing. She had never been in a situation like this before. Her people had always had power and pride. They were strong, and they didn't run from danger. But here she was, hiding in a cave, depending on a human for survival. "Why did you save me?" she asked, breaking the silence. The question had been nagging at her since he first appeared in the forest. "I don't understand. My people and yours. We fought before. Why risk your life for me?" Aiden didn't answer right away. Instead, he stared into the darkness of the cave, his face unreadable. For a moment, Lyra thought he might not answer at all, but then he spoke, his voice soft yet firm. "I've been where you are," he said, "alone, with nothing but the hope of survival. I've seen what happens when people are left to die, just because of who they are or where they come from. I couldn't just leave you out there. No one should face that kind of death alone." Lyra stared at him, his words sinking into her mind. She didn't fully understand, but something about his tone made her believe him. Aiden wasn't just some soldier with no heart. There was a deeper kindness in him, something that wasn't common in her world. "Are all humans like you?" she asked, curiosity getting the better of her. He shrugged, the faintest trace of a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "I can't speak for all humans, but I do what I can. I don't expect anyone to thank me for it." Lyra nodded slowly. "I never thought I'd meet a human like you." There was a silence between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Lyra couldn't explain it, but she felt like she could trust him. In a way, it was as if they had both been cast into the same situation, forced to survive together against the odds. "I've been running from things my whole life," Aiden continued, his voice quieter now, fighting battles that weren't mine. "But right now, I'm not running. I'm here to help you." Lyra looked down at her hands, which were still trembling. From the fear she had felt in the forest, she had been so sure she was going to die, and yet here she was, still alive. The human had saved her, and now she had to make a choice. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but sincere. Aiden nodded, his gaze flicking back to the cave entrance. The beast could still be out there, but for now, they were safe. At least for a little while. The hours passed slowly, the silence in the cave only broken by the occasional rustling of leaves outside. Lyra tried to sleep, but her mind kept turning over what had happened. She couldn't stop thinking about her people. They had cast her out, believing that the beast would end her life. They had expected her to die and never return. But here she was, alive, And it was because of a human, as the night stretched on. Lyra couldn't help but wonder what would happen when she returned to her people. She was supposed to be the future of the Zenthari, the one who would lead them into a new era. But now, after everything that had happened, she wasn't sure if she could go back to them the way she was. Could she really lead a people who had been so quick to abandon her? Was it possible for her to change their minds? Her thoughts were interrupted when Aiden spoke again. "We should leave soon," he said, standing up and brushing the dirt from his clothes. "The beast isn't going to give up. If we stay here, we'll be trapped." Lyra stood as well, stretching her stiff muscles. The air in the cave was damp, and the chill had settled deep into her bones. She knew that Aiden was right. They couldn't stay here forever. The beast was still out there, and if they didn't move, it would find them. She nodded. "You're right. Let's go." The two of them left the cave cautiously, making sure the coast was clear. Lyra's eyes scanned the forest, her senses heightened. The air was thick with tension, as though something was watching them, waiting for the right moment to strike. But for now the forest was quiet. They moved through the trees, staying as silent as possible. Lyra couldn't help but feel a little more at ease with Aiden beside her. For the first time in days, she felt like she had someone who truly cared about her survival. Maybe, just maybe, they would make it through this together. The forest was dense, the trees so tall that they blocked out most of the light. Lyra moved quietly behind Aiden, who was leading the way with practiced ease. She had never been in a forest like this before. Nothing in her homeland had prepared her for this kind of wildness. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, and every step they took seemed to echo in the quiet. The only sound was the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. The rest of the world held in a tense silence. Aiden glanced back at her, his expression focused. "We need to get to higher ground," he said, his voice low but urgent. "We'll have a better chance of spotting the beast before it spots us." Lyra nodded, though the idea of higher ground didn't sit well with her. It meant climbing, and her body was already sore from the running and hiding they'd done, but she didn't argue. Aiden knew what he was doing. She was starting to understand that the human wasn't just a soldier, he was a survivor. And right. Now, she needed to survive. As they continued, the sound of the forest grew louder. Birds called out in the distance, and the rustling of animals moving through the brush made Lyra's nerves twitch. She couldn't help but feel watched. It was as if the beast's presence was always just a breath away, lurking behind every tree and bush. She glanced nervously at the shadows, half expecting the creature to leap out at any moment. Aiden must have noticed her unease, because he slowed his pace and turned to face her. "You're doing fine," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "Stay focused. We can't afford to panic." Lyra took a deep breath, trying to steady her thoughts. She wasn't used to being afraid, especially not in this way. Her whole life had been spent in the comfort of palaces and halls, surrounded by guards and servants. There was no fear, there were only control. But here, on this alien world, she had no control. All she could do was keep moving, trust Aiden, and hope for the best. They reached a steep hill, and Aiden led the way up, his movements fluid and quick. Lyra followed, her legs aching with every step. The higher they climbed, the thinner the air seemed to get, but Aiden didn't slow down. He was already near the top when Lyra finally reached the summit. She paused at the top, breathing heavily, and looked around. The view from here was breathtaking. The forest stretched out in all directions, a sea of green with the occasional flash of color from the flowers and wildlife. In the distance, she could see the glint of water, a river that snaked its way through the land. The landscape was beautiful, but there was something ominous about it as well. Aiden was already scanning the horizon, his eyes sharp as he searched for any sign of movement. "We need to keep moving," he said after a moment. "The beast is still out there. We don't know how far it's followed us." Lyra's stomach twisted at the thought. She had seen how quickly the creature had moved and how deadly it was. She didn't want to think about what would happen if it caught them again. "Where do we go now?" she asked, her voice quiet. Aiden turned to her, his eyes narrowing slightly. Keep moving until we find a place where we can make a stand." We can't keep running forever. Lyra nodded. She'd always been taught to never show fear, especially in front of others. She couldn't hide it now, and the fear was real, and it was starting to eat at her. She wasn't just afraid of the beast. She was afraid of failing, of not being able to protect herself, or Aiden. She was afraid of being alone again. "You're not alone," Aiden said, as if reading her mind. "Not as long as I'm here." The words were simple, but they held a weight that Lyra hadn't expected. She felt a strange warmth spread through her chest, a feeling she couldn't explain. She had been alone for so long, and now, for the first time in days, she felt like someone cared about her survival. It was a comforting thought, but also a troubling one. How had this human, this stranger, come to mean so much in such a short time? They continued to walk the path, now more of a trail than a proper road. The trees were dense here, and the ground uneven, forcing them to move carefully. Lyra stumbled once, her foot catching on a rock, but Aiden was there in an instant, steadying her with a firm hand. He didn't say anything, just helped her back to her feet, and they kept going. There was no time to waste. The beast could still be out there. The forest began to thin as they approached the edge of a rocky cliff. Below them, the land stretched out, offering a glimpse of a small settlement in the distance. Lyra's heart leaped. Could it be a safe place? Or was it just another part of the wilderness that might be hiding more danger? Aiden stopped and looked down at the settlement. "It's a risk," he muttered. "We don't know what's there. Could be friendly, or it could be worse than the beast." Lyra looked at the settlement, her mind torn. She had been taught to distrust outsiders, especially those who lived on such a harsh world. But she was no longer in a position to be picky. Survival was more important than pride. "Do you think we can make it there?" she asked. Aiden nodded, but his expression was serious. "We'll have to move quickly. No hesitation. If it's safe, we'll rest there. If not, we keep moving." They both knew the risk, but it was a chance they had to take. They turned and made their way down the rocky slope toward the settlement, hoping that it would be the safety they desperately needed. As they made their way toward the settlement, Lyra's heart beat faster. The settlement was small, nestled in a valley surrounded by hills. It looked peaceful from a distance, but Lyra knew better than to trust appearances. She had seen too many peaceful places that hid dark secrets. The human beside her, Aiden, moved cautiously, his eyes scanning the surroundings with the alertness of someone who had been through countless dangers before. They walked in silence, each step bringing them closer to the settlement. The path grew clearer, and soon they were at the edge of the small community. There were huts made from wood and stone, with smoke rising from chimneys. Lyra could hear the sounds of people talking, children laughing, and the distant clang of metal. It looked like a normal village, but she knew it could be anything but. Aiden stopped and turned to her, his expression serious. "Stay close," he said quietly. "We don't know who's here or what they want. Let me do the talking." Lyra nodded, her hands instinctively reaching for the weapon at her side. She wasn't sure if it would do much against whatever they might face, but it made her feel better to have it there. The village could be a sanctuary, or it could be a trap. She had learned not to trust easily, especially in such a dangerous world. They walked into the settlement, and the villagers eyed them with curiosity. The people here were mostly humans, but there were a few other species as well. Lalians with different skin colors, and some with strange markings on their faces. They all watched Aiden closely, but no one spoke. It was clear that Aiden wasn't exactly welcome, but it was also clear that he wasn't a stranger to this place. The first person to approach them was a man with a thick beard and a scar running down his cheek. He looked at Aiden, then at Lyra, before speaking in a rough voice. "What brings you here, Aiden?" the man asked. "You're not welcome here. You know that. This place is for people who want to stay out of the war, not those who bring it with." Aiden didn't flinch at the man's words. "I'm not here for trouble," he said calmly. "Just need to make sure we're safe for a while. We've been running from something, and we need shelter. Can you help us or not?" The man studied Aiden for a moment, then looked at Lyra. She could feel the weight of his gaze, and she knew he was deciding whether to trust them. Finally, he nodded, but his expression was still hard. "Fine," the man said. "You can stay for the night, but you'll have to leave by morning." "We don't get involved in other people's wars, and I don't want any trouble," Aiden didn't argue. "Thanks," he said simply. The man turned and walked away without another word, and Aiden motioned for Lyra to follow. They were led to one of the smaller huts, a simple building made of wood and clay. Inside it was modest but comfortable. There were a few blankets on the floor, and a small fire burned in the corner. Lyra sat down on the floor, feeling the weight of the day settling on her shoulders. It had been a long, exhausting journey, and the danger had never been far behind. But now, for the first time in days, she felt like she could rest. She didn't trust the villagers completely, but at least they weren't trying to kill her. Aiden sat down across from her, his eyes scanning the room. He didn't seem as relaxed as Lyra felt. He was always on edge, always alert. He must have been through so much to be like this, she thought. He wasn't like the soldiers of her people, who fought for power and glory. He fought to survive, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. It made her feel like she had something to learn from him. "We'll stay here for the night," Aiden said, breaking the silence. "But we need to keep moving tomorrow. We can't risk staying in one place too long." Lyra nodded. "I understand. For now, we can rest, can't we?" Aiden gave her a small smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Yeah, we can rest." As the night wore on, the village settled into a quiet calm. The sounds of the people faded, and the only noise left was the crackling of the fire in the hut. Lyra lay down on the blankets, her mind still racing. She kept thinking about the beast that had nearly killed her, about the danger that still followed them. But for now, she was safe. She was alive. Aiden, on the other hand, sat by the fire, his eyes still alert. Lyra could tell that he wasn't sleeping. He wasn't the kind of person who could rest easily, not after everything he had been through. She wondered what kind of life he had lived before all of this. What had brought him to this planet? Had made him so determined to help her? She wanted to ask him, but she didn't. Not yet. There were too many questions, too many things she didn't understand. Eventually, the night grew colder, and the fire in the corner of the room flickered. Lyra closed her eyes, her body finally giving in to exhaustion. She had been running for so long, fighting for her life at every turn. But here, in this strange village, she found a brief moment of peace. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to sleep as she drifted off. She couldn't help but wonder what the next day would bring. Would the beast find them again? And what would happen when she had to face her people once more? There were so many unknowns, so many dangers ahead. But for now, she was alive, and that was enough. The morning came too soon. Lyra awoke to the soft light filtering through the cracks in the hut's wooden walls. The fire had burned low overnight, and the room was cool. Aiden was already awake. Sitting by the door with his back against the wall, his eyes were scanning the surroundings outside, his face serious and alert. It was clear that even in a place like this, he wasn't able to fully relax. Lyra stretched out her stiff muscles, feeling the soreness in her body from the days of running, hiding, and constant fear. She had never experienced anything like this before. She had always been protected, always in control. But now she was like a wanderer in a strange world, dependent on someone else for survival. She sat up, glancing at Aiden. "What's the plan?" she asked quietly, her voice still heavy. "With sleep?" Aiden turned his head slightly to look at her. "We leave soon," he said, his voice steady and calm. "Can't stay here any longer. The beast will find us again if we don't keep moving." "I don't trust these people enough to stay for too long." Lyra nodded. She understood. The villagers had been kind enough to offer them shelter for the night, but Aiden was right. They couldn't risk staying in one place for too long. The danger was far behind. She stood up and walked to the small window, peering out into the settlement. The villagers were going about their morning routines, but no one seemed to notice her or Aiden. It felt strange to be in a place where people didn't recognize her as the princess, where her status didn't matter. For the first time in a long while, she felt like just another person. After a few moments of silence, Aiden stood up and packed the few belongings they had. His movements were quick. and purposeful, as though he was always ready for whatever came next. Lyra gathered her things as well, though she didn't have much to carry. A few scraps of clothing, a small knife, and the faint memory of her once proud heritage. Aiden finished packing and turned to her. "You ready?" he asked, his eyes meeting hers. Lyra hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Let's go." They left the hut and walked through the settlement, making their way to the edge of the village. The villagers still watched them closely, but no one spoke to them. Aiden led the way, his steps confident and sure. Lyra followed, her mind racing with everything that had happened. The beast, the dangers of the world, and the strange feeling of being far from her people. It was all too much to take in at once. When they reached the edge of the settlement, Aiden paused. "This is where we part ways," he said, his voice low. "You can go back to your people if you want. They'll take you in. But remember, not everyone will welcome you back. You've been cast aside, and there are those who won't forgive you for that." Lyra felt a pang of guilt at his words. True. Her people had abandoned her, left her to die in the wild. They had never truly cared for her, not in the way she had imagined. The realization was hard to accept. Her entire life had been shaped by her family's expectations, and now, those expectations felt like a heavy burden she couldn't carry. "I don't know if I can go back," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Everything has changed. I've seen things I never thought I would. I've learned that I'm not the person I thought I was." Aiden nodded, as if he understood. "Sometimes we have to leave everything behind to move forward. You have a choice, Lyra. You can go back and try to rebuild what you lost, or you can move forward and make something new for yourself." Lyra stared into the distance, her mind racing with thoughts of what he had said. She had always been defined by her title, by her role as the princess of the Zenthari. But now, in this foreign world, she was just another person, just another survivor. The weight of her past seemed lighter here, but it also felt like it no longer mattered. After a long silence, Lyra made a decision. "I'm not going back," she said firmly. "I don't belong there anymore. I have to find my own way." Aiden gave her a small smile, his expression softening. "Good. You're stronger than you think, Lyra. You'll figure it out." They stood there for a few moments, taking in the vast landscape before them. The sky was clear, the air fresh and cool. Ahead, the world stretched out, filled with possibilities and unknown dangers. But it was also full of chances. Chances to rebuild, to start over. "Where do we go from here?" Lyra asked, her voice steady now. Aiden turned and pointed toward the horizon. "There's a place to the west. It's a bit safer. Can find shelter there, get some supplies, and plan our next move. The beast won't be able to follow us for long if we keep moving." Lyra nodded, feeling a sense of resolve settle over her. She had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she felt like she was in control of her own destiny. She wasn't a princess anymore. She wasn't anyone's pawn. She was Lyra, a survivor, and she would forge her own path. Together they turned and began walking toward the west, leaving the settlement and her past behind. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was hers to walk. The journey to the west was harder than Lyra had expected. The road was rough, and the terrain grew more difficult as they moved further away from the settlement. There were no clear paths, only wild stretches of land where the trees seemed to close in around them. But Lyra kept going, her legs aching with each step. She wasn't used to traveling like this on foot, through dense forests and uneven ground, but she had made her decision. There was no turning back now. Aiden led the way, his steps sure and steady as he navigated the difficult terrain. Lyra followed closely, trying her best to keep up. Despite her exhaustion, she couldn't help but feel a sense of freedom. For the first time in her life, she wasn't bound by the expectations of others. She was making her own choices, walking her own path, and it felt different from anything she had ever known. The sun hung high in the sky, casting long shadows as they made their way through the wilderness. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, and the only sounds were the crunch of leaves beneath their feet, and the occasional call of birds high in the trees. Aiden found herself watching Aiden as he moved ahead of her, taking in his quiet confidence, She had never met anyone like him before, someone who moved through the world with such purpose, someone who didn't need to explain himself to anyone. After a while, Aiden stopped and turned to look at her. "We need to rest," he said, his voice calm but firm. "There's a river nearby. We can stop there for a while, get some water, and gather our strength." Lyra nodded, grateful for the chance to rest. Her body was sore, her feet aching from the long walk. She had always been accustomed to luxury and comfort, not the rough reality of survival. But now, as she stood on the edge of this wild world, she realized how much she had changed in such a short time. They walked for another half-hour, the sound of running water growing louder as they neared the river. When they finally reached it, Aiden knelt down and cupped his hands to drink from the clear water. Lyra followed his lead, kneeling beside him and letting the cool liquid wash away the dryness in her throat. The water was refreshing, and for a moment, she felt like she could forget about everything, the danger, the beast, and the uncertainty of what lay ahead. Once they had drunk their fill, Aiden stood up and started to gather some sticks and branches from the surrounding area. "We need a fire," he said. "We can't risk being out here without one. The cold can come fast, especially in the mountains." Lyra watched him work, amazed at how effortlessly he built the fire. She had never learned how to make a fire like this. She had always had servants to do it for her. But now, there was no one else to rely on but herself and Aiden. As the fire crackled to life, Aiden sat back, his eyes watching the flames dance in the quiet night. Lyra sat beside him, staring into the fire. The warmth was comforting, but it didn't ease the uncertainty in her chest. She still didn't know where they were going or what they would find. Every step felt like a leap into the unknown. After a while, Aiden spoke again. "Can't keep running forever," he said, his voice quieter this time. "Eventually, we'll have to face what's chasing us. It's the beast, the people who abandoned you. Whatever it is that's waiting for us out there." Lyra looked at him, surprised by his honesty. "I know," she said softly, "but I don't know if I'm ready for that. I don't even know who I am anymore." Aiden looked at her, his expression softening. "You're still Lyra. You're still the person who fought to survive when everyone thought you would die. That hasn't changed. What matters is what you do next. The past is behind you. What you choose now, that's what defines you." Lyra stared at the flames, his words settling deep in her mind. For so long, she had been defined by the title of princess, by the expectations of her people. She had lived her life according to what others wanted her to be. But now, in this wild world, she had the chance to decide who she truly was. It was both freeing and terrifying. She glanced at Aiden, feeling a sudden surge of gratitude. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything. For saving me, for helping me when no one else would." Aiden shrugged, as if it was no big deal. "You would have done the same for me, if the roles were reversed." Lyra wasn't so sure. She had been raised to think that others were beneath her, to treat those who weren't royalty with distance. But Aiden had shown her something different. He didn't see her as a princess or a symbol of power. He saw her as a person. And for the first time, she felt like one. The fire crackled again, sending sparks up into the night sky. Lyra looked up at the stars, feeling small in the vastness of the world. There was so much she didn't understand, so much she still had to learn. But she knew one thing. She was no longer just the princess of the Zenthari. She was Lyra, a survivor, and she was ready to face whatever came next. Aiden stood up and stretched, looking over the horizon. "We should sleep soon. We'll need all our energy for tomorrow." Lyra nodded, her eyelids heavy. She lay down on the ground, staring up at the stars above. But she didn't know what the future held, but for the first time she felt like she had a chance to shape it. Whatever happened, she wouldn't face it alone. And that was enough.